We're on year 2 of 35 years of Madden in 35 weeks. In this entry, we're taking a look at John Madden Football for the Sega Genesis, as well as John Madden Football for the Super Nintendo. To make things interesting, I'm going to spin for a team every single season, and whatever it lands on is the team I'm going to play for the entirety of their season. So let's see what we get, and we've got the San Francisco 49ers. The real-world 49ers went 14-2 in the regular season and made it all the way to the conference championship, but in that game were denied a third straight Super Bowl after a game-winning field goal by Giants kicker Matt Barr. Some player highlights included Jerry Rice's 100 reception season with over 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. In Joe Montana's last full season as the Niners quarterback, he threw for over 3,900 yards, 26 touchdowns to 16 interceptions with a 61.7% completion percentage and 162 rushing yards. With the team selected, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to start off with the Sega Genesis version, and then we're going to put in the Super Nintendo one later and make some comparisons between the two because there are some pretty big differences. The Genesis version's music starts suddenly, so get ready. Immediately, you're hit with that Sega Genesis sound. I mean, it definitely has that vibe that so many Sega Genesis games have, and for comparison's sake, let's hear what this sounds like on the Super Nintendo. It is kind of a minor thing, but there's not a lot of songs in this game, and the Sega Genesis version of this song is just so much better. It also has a phrase that the other one just doesn't have. That's enough about the soundtrack though, let's talk about the actual games. The Genesis version is pretty bare when it comes to options. You have game modes, regular season and playoffs, as well as selecting 1 or 2 players with the AI being controlled by John Madden, and then team selections. Just like the last entry, there is no NFL license, and surprisingly only 16 teams are represented. However, on the Super Nintendo version, which did come out a year later, it does have all 28 team cities represented, with the Raiders being Oakland and the Jets being New Jersey. The options between the two games are also pretty similar. Thankfully, the Genesis version does have San Francisco, so any opponents who may be missing, I'll fill in with either the All Madden team option on the Genesis or playing it on the SNES. And while I wish I could have played all of it on real hardware, there was some complications when I started, so some of this is emulated, but a lot of it is real hardware. Now, the gameplay is clearly different than its predecessor and streamlined for a console experience while providing a bit more of an arcadey feel. You can still call a set, a formation, and then a play, and it's all streamlined to be commanded by the ABC buttons, or on the SNES version, YBA. If it's a run play, your quarterback will automatically hand it off, and if it's a passing play, it's up to you to decide when to start passing, who to pass to, and when to release. The Genesis version took a little bit of getting used to, but I suppose I got lucky with a powerhouse like the 1990 49ers as my team because passing, receiving, and rushing were all electric, and while I was learning the ropes, I could still lean on my rushing for 200 plus yards a game easy. However, even after adjusting to the passing game, I found the Super Nintendo version was less forgiving than the Genesis. What would normally result in a reception would instead go errant or just seem to go through my player. I eventually would go on to abandon the passing game for the most part in the SNES version, and this would result in some hilariously lopsided stats like this game at halftime where I had 172 rushing yards and only 2 receiving. Comparing the two visually, the SNES version absolutely looks better than the Genesis. However, you can see that it's at a huge cost to the performance. I'm not kidding when I say the SNES version seemed to run at best at half the frame rate of the Genesis version, and because of this, the game felt super slippery in comparison, and maybe why there was some in-game inconsistencies. Maybe this is an actual case of what Nintendo. So how did my 1990 San Francisco 49ers do? Our team actually fell 1 game shy, going 13-3 with 2 losses against the All Madden team as well as Cincinnati. Our biggest win was week 17 against Minnesota, where we went 42-2, where yes, they got a safety on me because I tried to pass from our own end zone. And my biggest loss was week 1 because I was still trying to figure out how to play this game. My favorite game was definitely when we played against Houston in week 5, where we were going back and forth the entire time. I was down by 7 in the 4th quarter. I threw a 50-yard bomb to get us within field field goal range with 3 seconds left, took it to overtime until I eventually rushed it in for the W. So for someone like me who's really never played Madden games before until now, I'd have to say that John Madden Football for the Sega Genesis is great. I actually had a lot of fun playing this, and I found myself wanting to play it more, and I'm already looking forward to Madden 92. I think the game is super easy to pick up, I think the game is super fun to play, and since you can play 5-minute games, you're able to get through a good amount. However, even at 5 minutes, each game will last you about 30 to 35 minutes real time. Super Nintendo version is one that I would suggest skipping. I think it's completely inferior to the Sega Genesis one. While there might be some more visual upgrades, the fact that it runs so poorly just means that you can skip it if for some reason you wanted to go back and play these retro sports games. So yeah, that's it for John Madden Football. Next, we're going to be taking a look at John Madden Football 92 for the Sega Genesis and the Sega Genesis only. Stay tuned for that one, and thank you so much for watching, folks. Cheers.